Hello and welcome back to another episode of IgG4-RD Life. I am one of your hosts, Mahsa and Today I'll be interviewing and talking with another fellow IgG4-RD patient, Lindsey Joe. And Lindsey is one of the more active patients that we have within the rare disease community and within our IgG4 community. So I'm really excited to talk with her today. We've been trying really hard to find some time, and we finally got to do it today. So I'm really excited. Lindsey, let's hear a little bit about your journey, or introduce yourself, and then let's hear about your journey to diagnosis and all the things that you've been going through, your struggles, your successes, all of the good stuff.
All right. Well, thank you, Masa, for having me on the podcast. My name is Lindsey, and I'm the newest moderator for our Living with IgG4 Related Diseases patient support group. And I'm honored to be stepping into that role and to be on the podcast as well. My professional background's in mental health and counseling. And also, since I was diagnosed with IgG4, I've been hiking a lot as well. In addition to IgG4, I also have ADHD, so I may jump around a little bit in telling my journey. I was officially diagnosed with IgG4 related disease in May of 2022 through biopsy, but my journey actually started in early 2020. I was initially diagnosed with Still's disease, which is also rare, and it's an autoinflammatory condition that involves fevers, rashes, and joint pain. Still's disease looks a lot like how my symptoms were presenting at first, but my diagnosis has officially changed to IgG4 related disease as more information became available. So my journey is very long. So grab a snack, get in a comfortable position, take your shoes off. And there are two parts to my journey. There's before the tumor and after the tumor. And for me, after the tumor is actually where things started to get better for me, which is not usually the case with other diseases. So I was 33 when I became aware that my journey was starting. And this happened in February 2020. I thought it was a cold or a virus at first. I had muscle aches, high fever, sore throat, headache, chills, fatigue, and really, really severe neck pain right in the back of my neck, to the point where it felt like my head would get stuck sometimes and I couldn't even turn my head when I was driving or walking. It was just stuck. So this happened in 2020. I was working full time in the office. Everybody in the office had been sick recently. Kind of how it worked back then and is starting to work again is when one person comes to work sick, it kind of spreads like wildfire and everybody gets it. So everybody got it. My entire family was sick as well. Everybody was sick. So I just assumed that I had what everybody else had. But then after about 2 weeks, everybody got better and I got worse. So now we're in March of 2020 and the COVID pandemic is starting and the world has shut down. So my job went remote and my position was considered essential in the US during the shutdown. So I switched to telehealth and I was able to continue working, which actually looking back was really a blessing to be able to do that, because I don't think I would have been able to continue working if we didn't start working from home. But the pandemic I'm talking about because it really impacted the timeline of my journey, because there were rules about certain symptoms that you couldn't have if you wanted to participate in society in person, like no fevers, no headaches, chills, joint pain, all the things I was having, you could not have and be in society at that time. And I had a lot of these symptoms really early on with my IgG4 related disease. So by April of 2020, 2 months in, I was still really sick. My primary care doctor wouldn't see me in person due to the fevers. So I saw my doctor remotely over the computer a handful of times, and they threw what they could at me: take some antibiotics, take a Z-Pack, over the counter everything, rest, call us in a week if it's not better. So it wasn't better. And this time is actually kind of funny to reflect back on, because at the time it wasn't funny, but thinking about it now, there was this incident where I had this spider web looking thing. I don't know if it was a rash or veins or what on my leg. And I had to go, I was trying to show them in the virtual appointment, this is what's happening. This isn't normal. What is this? Is this part of what's happening to me? And they couldn't see it. So I had to go stand in my yard and like show them in my yard with the computer, so that the lighting would be okay. So just very, very bizarre doing
I know what
telehealth.
it's called. So
You
that is
do?
called, yeah, so that's called livedo reticularis. So if look up a picture of it, and I think it might actually be what you're talking about. I'll send you the name, livedo reticularis.
Okay, thank you. I was gonna say you might have to spell that for me.
Yeah, it's like your blood capillaries. They like come up and you get this web shape going down your leg and arms. Yeah, that was when I was
Wow.
in my disease progression too. That was the thing that scared the crap out of me. But and then all my doctors were like, "Oh, you're fine. That's just libido. That's just reticularis. You're fine." Like I was like, "Oh, okay."
That is so
So,
interesting. And I've noticed I still get it now, even though I'm doing so much better now when I fly. After I fly, I'll get it kind of everywhere and then it goes away within 24 hours.
yeah, it's the blood flow. So that it kind of makes sense, that especially when you're flying, it happens.
No, thank you for sharing. I did not know that
Yeah.
had a name. That's wonderful. So that happened. This is still April 2020, and the medications I had been prescribed at this point had done nothing. Antibiotics, Z-Pak, over-the-counter pain meds. And at this point, I had started doing a lot of research on my own into what could be causing these symptoms. So HIV/AIDS kept coming up when I typed in my symptoms. And so I ordered an at-home HIV/AIDS test, because at this point, we're still not going in to get tested anywhere. Everybody's at home. And so I took this test kind of over Zoom with this doctor. And then luckily, everything was negative with that. So then I went around with my insurance and I found a private clinic that was offering tests for active COVID-19 and then COVID-19 antibodies. And it was pretty expensive because tests weren't available yet, but it was so worth it at that point, because I kept thinking, this is COVID. This has to be. Nobody knows what it is. There's this new disease. That's what I have. So that was negative, that I did not have active COVID and I did not have antibodies, meaning I had never had COVID. So we're back at square one again. But at this point, my primary care doctor agreed to finally see me in person, because now we know it's not COVID. So that was, I think, the reason why everything was virtual still. So they agreed to see me in person and ran some tests. We did some more advanced blood work. They tested for things like lupus, HIV and AIDS again, various cancers, and Epstein-Barr. But this time the blood work was positive for Epstein-Barr virus antibodies. So my doctor just assumed that I currently had EBV and was dealing with maybe residual effects from that if I didn't currently have it. And they diagnosed me with mono, told me to rest, take some over-the-counter Tylenol, just wait for it to pass. So that's 2 months in. Just wait it out, it'll go away. I was thinking, okay, mono's bad, it'll go, but it never did. So I continued to be very, very sick. And now my symptoms included joint pain, severe fatigue, daily spiking fevers over 101 degrees, 1 to 3 times per day. And I started noticing, because I was tracking at this time, the fevers were only happening in the afternoon. And then I was also really anemic. There were lots of weird skin manifestations, chills, night sweats, muscle spasms, neck pain, swollen lymph nodes. My feet and legs would get really swollen. My knees and kind of elbows would get swollen, loss of appetite. And then I would get stabbing pains near my heart, spleen, and pancreas. And that sounds like a list of medication side effects as I rattle
It
off all
does.
the symptoms.
But you know what? Actually, I when I go through still everything that you talk about, especially in my relapse. So like even right as the heart stabbing pain, especially from the back and the front, and the pancreas. Oh my gosh, that's one of the worst ones.
Yeah.
But it's all bad. It's all bad. I mean, when I was in my progressive stage, when we still didn't know what was going on, all of these things that you're mentioning was happening like one after another, and none of it would go away. So it was just like I was just becoming more paralyzed and more stiff. I thought I had stiff person disease, like suddenly
I thought that too. That was one of the
I
ones
was
I was
like,
looking at.
right, I was like picking up like a cup like this. I couldn't like, touch. It was just so bad. It was so bad. So I feel with you. It's crazy. It's, when you hear someone else say it, it's like, man, I really wasn't alone. There's a whole other person going through the exact same thing.
It's
Dang. Sorry.
amazing.
Like, I'm sorry you had to go through that, but now
You
after we've been
too.
through it, right? Yeah. But when we talk about it, it's like still, it feels good to know that like there's somebody else who understands.
Right. It's healing that someone else has experienced that and then also had doctors say, oh, it's nothing. Your scans are clear. I don't see anything.
Being gaslit. Yeah, we like that. We
Oh,
have
yeah.
that in common.
So by this point, I could barely eat or walk due to the nausea, fatigue, and joint pain. And then, as we know, we need to eat to get energy and strength and to get better. So, not being able to eat, I was just getting weaker and weaker and weaker, no energy. I was constantly exhausted. I would fall asleep immediately as soon as I got off work. I would fall asleep in the car if someone was driving me somewhere, just anywhere I could, I would fall asleep instantly. And I don't sleep well, and I never have. So being able to sleep like that was new for me. There was definitely something wrong. So at one point, I fell asleep in my car in the driveway coming home from an appointment because I was just too tired to go inside. So I just slept in my driveway. And I'm like, this isn't normal. This is not good. So my doctor finally agreed to see me in person again because I lied about having a fever and I took meds to mask the fever. Because at this point, I'm figuring out that they only come in the afternoon. If I have an all day fever, that's real illness or regular illness. If I have the afternoon only fever, that's whatever this mystery illness is. So I masked the fever with meds, wore a mask, but it did come back while I was in the office. And at this point, my neck pain was so severe, I could barely walk. They said, get up on the exam table, we'll look at you. I couldn't even get on the table by myself. I burst into tears just from the pain trying to climb onto this exam table. And they asked me what was wrong. I told them again, this is how long it's been going on. They decided you might have meningitis. This seems like a medical emergency now. So you need to go to the ER right away. And that was after though, I go into the doctor and I tell them, I've been sick for 5 months. I can't walk. I can't eat. I've lost 20 pounds. I'm not trying to lose weight. This is unhealthy. Something is wrong. And I'm saying this through tears. And the physician's assistant that had come in, I think it might have even been a secretary, somebody said, I wish I could lose 20 pounds without even trying.
Oh,
And I
God.
was like, oh, are you serious right now? Yeah, I don't know about that part. We'll see.
Oh, no, you can share that. You can
Okay.
absolutely share that. Oh, my gosh.
Just,
I mean, medical field etiquette is something, because I've been told a lot of things, and I've heard them say a lot of things, and they've crossed the line 100% of, I don't know. It was just, so you're more than fine saying that. We're not mentioning, who, where, what.
all right. Sounds good. Yeah. To me, that was the worst thing to say to somebody that was in tears, that was so sick and wanted answers. Just, oh, you lost 20 pounds. That's wonderful. Just,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know.
horrible. It's horrible because it's like it's an illness. It's an illness that's causing me this. It's not a happy-go-lucky. I'm not fit. It's like
Right.
I'm losing weight, but I'm not fit. This is because of something more serious happening. And for someone to come in and say that, to hold, you know, a title in the medical field, and yeah, that's not right.
Exactly.
Something that Amgen does that I like is they go into hospitals and clinics, and they train staff on these types of like patient care etiquettes. And I go to Cedar Sinai, and I know that they have been trained by Amgen, and so I get so much better interaction when I'm there with all of the staff, no matter what. I've never ran into an issue. I've never had to sit there and be angry and stressed, which is a whole complete change. It's a whole 180 for me, going through all these years, through all these other hospitals and doctors and specialists, and being treated the way that I was and versus how I'm being treated over here. It's just like it's heaven and earth. I don't know, two different galaxies. I just want to say.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, so it really is important, and the patient is degrading on that level, and then the doctors are the ones who stress us out, or the medical professionals are the ones who are stressing us out. That stress is worse for us because it causes more relapse, more flares, it causes the disease to even progress. And so it's like you gotta, and I understand that they have a lot going on too, but at the same time, it's like we are there because we need you, so please help, be nice.
Exactly.
That's insane.
That's one of my little gaslighting tidbits there. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sorry you have to go through that. It's never okay, And so for those who hear this, I hope that they take this into consideration the next time they see a patient in pain, or they might say something like that to a patient. They can be considerate now because they know that it has a negative impact on that person.
Right. Yeah. Comments like that don't land well when we're that sick. They just don't, even if it's a joke, even if it's from a good place, doesn't land 100%. Well.
Exactly. Let us do the joking.
Yes. So kind of going back to that doctor's visit. So I'm very, very, very sick. They think I might have meningitis. They send me to the ER to be tested for meningitis. And I want to say too, the reason I hadn't been to the hospital up until this point is because pandemic is still full blown. There are no vaccines out there. The hospitals are full, and they were saying, don't go to the hospital unless you're dying, pretty much, that we need the beds. There's no doctors to treat you, don't go. So at this point, going to the hospital is a really big deal because we had been encouraged not to for so long. And so they did the spinal tap. It was negative, and then they connected me with this wonderful infectious disease specialist. So at home we call her the female Dr. House because she went through everything. I do too.
I watched all of the episodes back in the day, and I was so young back then too, but I love that show. So that's amazing. We need doctors like her.
Yes, we do.
Seriously, I'm so glad I could go on.
And also, there isn't a Dr. House episode yet about IgG4, right? That would be a good one for them to do if they're still writing.
He did a Sjogren's episode, though.
Oh.
He had one. He had to put like an onion in front of the patient's face when he finally figured out what she had. And he was like, what do you guys notice? No tears, right? Sjogren's.
Have you tried that with an onion?
Yeah, and it's not true. It actually really stings and burns, and we tear up, but it doesn't necessarily come up, but we for sure tear up. And the stinging does happen. So we did talk about that in our Sjogren's group one time. We were like, that's not true. That still stings us. Like, we still water up from it, but it's kind of like saying, how come I didn't have that good side, that good symptom of it, or that good side of it, where I don't have to suffer when I cut? I mean,
right.
Kind of like how that doctor was telling you with the weight loss. Because I'm over here, and all of my diseases are supposed to cause weight loss, and I am up like 40 pounds, So I'm over here like, why don't I get that symptom? How come I have every other symptom in the book, but not that one?
Like, how do I get that side effect?
Can I swap? Sometimes I wish we could, be like, can I not have these symptoms and have these instead,
I get it.
Yes, Dr. House.
Dr. House.
She was like Dr.
Yes.
House. Yeah.
So they connect me with her, and this doctor is somebody that instead of the 15-minute appointments, she is spending tons of time with me on the phone, emailing, after hours, late at night. Anytime she thinks of something, she's reaching out. Have you been exposed to this? Have you been exposed to this? And so she started testing for a lot of environmental toxins, anything I had potentially been exposed to, Lyme disease, because I had been bitten by a tick maybe a year prior to getting sick. So she explored that. Bartonella, which is cat scratch fever, all of that kept coming back negative. So she decided to order a CT scan. So in August 2020, I had a full body CT scan that showed, and I have the wording, but I might pronounce it wrong. Small lung nodules, left thoracic inlet, lymphadenopathy. Yeah, lymphadenopathy. That one. So there was left thoracic inlet lymphadenectomy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that one. That's like when you get the enlarged lymph nodes.
Yeah, so that was what, before I even had a biopsy, what the CT said. And I had no idea that was connected to the swelling and the pain. That's really interesting that that's what was causing that. The more we learn.
The more we learn. I know I only learned it after talking to the patients who have lymphadenopathy, you know, with their IgG4. So just talking to patients, right? It's like I pick up on the things that they say, and I'm like, oh, I totally relate to that, because I usually pick up on it, especially if I've gone through it, and it seems like I've gone through almost everything, but as a lot of it just have symptoms that come and go. But it's crazy. It's crazy.
It is definitely. So I had
that. Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead. You're good.
No, I was gonna say, so you had that CT in August 2020, and this was, you said they had sent you from somewhere. Oh, they had sent you to the ER.
Yes. So in July 2020, I went to the ER for a spinal tap because they were thinking I had meningitis. And then they connected me with female Dr. House, who was an infectious disease specialist. And she ran through every possibility she could think of, and then ordered a CT just to see if anything was going on. So there were the lung nodules, the left thoracic inlet. Help me out with that word.
Lymphadenopathy.
Yes, thank you. And then also retroperitoneal and iliac lymph nodes that were swollen as well, which I know now from some of the IgG4-RD stuff that is very connected. And then my spleen was also mildly enlarged. So all this is showing up. Her suspected diagnoses were sarcoidosis, lymphoma, or something infectious. And so because lymphoma was on there, we definitely wanted to get that biopsy to rule out cancer. So I was referred, they identified a lymph node that was kind of near my heart to biopsy because it was one of the more swollen ones that they could get to safely. And then I met with a cardiothoracic surgeon to do the biopsy. So then end of August, I have this biopsy. They had to cut through my neck, and I still kind of have a scar, but it's pretty faded. So they went through my neck and pulled out the lymph node and did all their testing. And in the hospital, it came back that, I guess the basic testing said, we still don't know what this is. It's not any of these things you think it is, but we still don't know. So this biopsy was supposed to be an outpatient procedure, and that's how it started. But then when I went home from surgery, about 10 or 20 hours later, I got really, really sick, was throwing up, severe stomach pain, went back to the ER thinking there's been a complication with surgery, pancreatitis. So after, and I'm still really sick, really weak at this point, after the surgery, I guess my body just reacted and freaked out to whatever change was happening after the surgery. And I developed my first and only episode of acute pancreatitis, which was unexplained, and they didn't know why, because I didn't have any of the typical risk factors at that time for pancreatitis. And then they just kind of treated it as pancreatitis, not connected to anything else. So my lymph node is getting biopsied at this time. I'm in the hospital, and I was in the hospital for over a week recovering from pancreatitis. And this is still 2020, so you're allowed one visitor at a time. I think 2 hours a day was what they were doing. The visitor had to have their temperature taken and all this stuff. So I was alone a lot of the time in the hospital and advocating for myself while also on really strong morphine. That was fun.
That's insane. I feel the same. And it's interesting that morphine, are you allergic to any pain meds?
I am allergic to sulfa, and that's the only medication that I know
Okay.
of.
Okay, got it. I'm allergic to all of it. And morphine would be the only thing my body would tolerate, but they give Ativan right after it, or else like my heart will stop. Like I'll stop breathing, like my air will close. But all the other ones, they give me hives and fevers and crazy itch, just head to toe. So
that's so scary.
It's just they took my gallbladder out when finally it had lost its function, and they still didn't tell me what was going on. When they took it out, the hospital was like, we can't give you anything, because the only things that we give out are Vicodin and Oxy. So they went ahead and gave me Tylenol. They removed the whole organ, and I have to like sit there and take Tylenol every 6 hours. They were moderating it, like 500 milligrams, not even, it was like 500 milligram every 6 hours. I'm like, that's nothing.
Yes, that is a Band-Aid for a bullet wound.
It was so bad. It was so bad.
Oh, I'm sorry you went through that.
It's insane. But that whole it happening during COVID, oh my gosh, you're so right about that, because a lot of us actually got our diagnosis around then, and we did have to be by ourselves a lot of the time, and then having to advocate in that state that we were in. I mean, I think I've told you before, I've had like crazy brain fog and like speech impairment I was having with the whole neck. When the neck was involved, my jaw was just like kind of partially locked, so I couldn't even talk. And so I had Post-its on myself saying like what I needed to when I went in, and they would refuse to read the Post-its. Could you imagine?
No.
They're like, I'm not reading that. Just tell me. I'm like, I can't talk. Like I really couldn't talk, And this is like when I say, that patient care, etiquette that needs to be there and wasn't there, especially during COVID. It wasn't, because they were like, I don't have time for this. Just tell me what's wrong with you. And it's like, I can't talk.
Yes, the Post-its are brilliant, I think. That's a great idea.
I was like, I took the time and wrote my issues, what I'm going through, and I put one here, one here, medications I'm on, because I'm tired of repeating it to 100 different people when I cannot speak, and they would just simply refuse to read it, and I remember that was the worst night of my life in the ER. It was the worst 12 hours that I spent out there. It was one of the last times that I actually went to the ER. I decided I will no longer be wasting my time. I will, and I was telling them, I'm like, I'm gonna die in front of you, and you're not gonna care. To be honest with you, I was like, I'm gonna pass away. You're not gonna care. They're like, no, if you were actually going to die, that's when we would take care of you. And I was like, oh okay. I forget that. It's such like, this is that steps that I was telling you that we don't need, and then we have to sit there and advocate for ourselves. So all the more power to you.
Going to the ER is terrifying with IgG4 or with a rare disease, any rare disease. It is terrifying going to the ER. And I remember even after I officially got diagnosed, being in the Facebook group asking, I'm having this symptom. Do I need to go to the ER? Because if I go, I'm going to have to explain everything, and I really don't have the energy. And am I going to die? Can I just stay home and deal with this? Because going to the ER is horrible.
Yeah, it's really bad. It feels like it's there as an emergency, but when you feel like you're in an emergency, they actually don't treat it as such. It's like they're waiting for you to walk in with something broken or, completely bleeding, or you can't stop the bleeding. It's like heart attack, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't do this. I don't know. I feel like sometimes some things could have been prevented, had an immediate action been taken, right when we went in. So
Absolutely.
gosh, the number of times they said hormones, stress, dehydration, every time that I just was in the hospital, I couldn't hold anything down, and it was really difficult. It was really difficult. And then later on find out, oh wow, it was actually affecting my bowel duct. And, went on for 6 years. I was suffering so bad and then completely lost its function. But it could have been stopped, had they just cared a bit more. And gosh, I hate it when they say it's hormones. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like you're in early menopause or it's PMS, it's just your hormones are off balance and that's why, too much stress, too much dehydration. And it's like, no, I'm okay, thank you, I'll go home now.
Yeah, or they suggest things that just are not going to work in that situation. I think they told me you should exercise and move around more when I couldn't walk. I was like, I would love to exercise. I would love to be able to run again and move around. I can't. That's why I'm here.
Right, my a neurologist I had in the beginning said when I was having crazy leg and arm issues, and I mean I really was having issues. I was like, I have some type of neuropathy, going down my leg. And he's like, did you ride a bike when you were a kid? And I was
What?
like, yeah, sometimes I did ride a bike because, I had a bike, but not all the time. For a couple of years, he's like, that's it. That's what the issue is. You rode a bike when you were a kid and it has ruined your legs today. And I was like, no, here's my new diagnosis. I have these diseases. And he was like, no, you don't. You have this. You don't have this disease for old people. And I was like, oh, yeah. All right, so see you later. You are a horrible doctor. And I just walked out. I was like, I cannot do this. I cannot do this. I'm diagnosis for things. I'm coming to you to take care of the neurological side. And it was just no. So I had to change complete doctors again.
Yes, that's another thing that I've run into a lot is that you're too young for this to be happening. Like, well, it is. Sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
It's happening.
And it's been happening from probably, like for me, it's been sparking since I was a baby, right? So I had all these different things that came up. So how many of us have had it since we were younger and we've been dismissed and gaslit and, God forbid, the blood doesn't even show. We don't even have the antibodies for it. So it makes it even tougher for them to believe us. But being dismissed for our age, that has hurt me so much. With this whole narrative, the older males, it even hurts our younger boys, who have had it for as long as they have, and they have had multiple organ failures. Those who didn't make it and aren't with us here today, like this is because it wasn't being believed that children can have it. And we know now there's a little bit of a genetic component to it, so we need to, like, doctors, if you're listening, take children seriously too. you know, because that's one of the hardest parts. I feel like for me, being a child that grew up with all these different types of restrictions and that I didn't understand, nor did anybody around me, made it really difficult and it made it really lonely. Uh, I really, even though I hadn't met any of you, I would have thought that I was still the only one like going crazy with all of this. But then talking with you all and being like, okay, no, there's similar cases. Okay, so I'm not lonely, first of all. And second of
Right.
all, we're valid. What we've been going through has been valid this whole time. They just need to take us more seriously. So, man, children.
Yes. And for all I know, I may have had this as a child too. And I'm thinking maybe I just noticed it because it became severe when I was 33, but there were things that happened. So I looked back after I got my first diagnosis, which I'll get to in a minute, but I looked back in all my childhood records and in almost every pediatrician visit, because my mom keeps all the handwritten everything in this envelope. She's so organized. At all the pediatrician visits, there were notes about joint pain, and they diagnosed it as growing pains, which maybe it was, but joint pain, that was there again and again, or different joints and muscles that I was complaining
That's
about at
it.
different times. And I remember a couple times in middle school and high school going to the hospital for pain in my neck, which eventually I ended up having a tumor there. So was it there as a child? I don't know. But they told me things like, you have something called a tortuscus, and it's from not blow drying your hair before you go to bed, and you sleep with the ceiling fan on, and that's why your neck hurts, and just take this muscle relaxer and you'll be fine. And knowing now that I had a tumor, I'm like, was it?
Oh my God. What a thing to say though. I mean,
Oh yeah. Bizarre.
that's just muscle stiffness that anybody can get from that, temperature change and the fan hitting at you the whole night. But that's insane. So yeah, even for me, I associated it with the term lazy. So so I was ignoring the pain that I was feeling, and I thought everybody was feeling it. I literally thought everybody was going through what I was going through. Like when I was in school and I was sitting at the desk, I mean, it was like torture sitting at that desk for the 7, 8 hours of school. Um, my my legs would hurt, my neck, my back. I mean, it was insane. And then even when I wanted to go out for like walking, my dad would force me on these like crazy 3 hour hikes. And it came to a point I didn't want to go because I was in so much pain. And he was like, no, you're just being lazy, being lazy. So I was like, okay, so that feeling of the legs and the joints things, oh, it's just being lazy.
Right.
So,
You didn't know. That was all you had known.
yeah, yeah, I had no idea. My mom used to come into the room when I would be studying. I was like 9 or 10 years old. I swear to God, I would put my feet up against the wall and I would be laying flat back holding my book like this. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, it's more comfortable for me. Like, I had no idea that, oh my gosh, I had blood pooling happening. I had thoughts, and, my dysautonomia, all of it started making sense because I was like, I was showing you what. When I was studying in bed, I would always like lay, on my stomach and study. And she's like, why are you not sitting at the desk? I'm like, well, because it hurts me, you know? So it's like, I feel like even I said it throughout, my younger years, it just wasn't taken seriously.
Yeah.
And even if it was, they would take me to the doctor. My blood work says I'm fine. So, so I can't even blame them.
And
It's just
even
how it
now,
happened.
yeah, even now that doctors may have been educated about IgG4, which I say may because it's been around, what, 10 years now that we've known about it?
No, longer.
Longer than that?
Earliest case was 2001. Came
2001.
out. But I mean, the IgG subclass test was what, I think in the 60s, that 70s or 60s when they came out with that. And then Mikulicz founded the disease in the late 1800s. So
So
he
it's been
founded
around a while.
yeah, it's been around for a while, but like us rediscovering it, I like to say, right? I feel like
That
that's
makes
what
sense.
happened. We have to go back and find out those rare cases and then rediscover it and come up with new ways of testing for it and the pathogenesis, I guess, of all the things, right? So yeah, it's been around for quite a while.
That's
But I know, I mean,
interesting.
but yeah, more commonly, yeah, in the recent years, absolutely. In the recent years. So
And even with the knowledge that exists now, which it's growing, it's getting there, even with
still not
that,
enough.
if a patient goes to a doctor and they run the CBC blood work, a lot of times that will look fine because that's not how things show up. Everything will look normal. They might do x-rays, everything will look normal. It's the wrong test.
Exactly. So the first thing when you go in for a full checkup, right, or your annual checkup for any regular person, those tests need to be different now. They need to be adding different panels to the testing. And even the IgG subclass, even the antibodies tests, those are not as accurate anymore. So they're even looking at autobodies versus antibodies. So it's just looking for the different things in the blood because clearly it's just outdated what we've been doing. We go in, we check for cancers, we check for what we know, we're like, all right, is it lupus? Is it, oh, okay, at least it's not lupus. At least it's like, it's worse what I have. What do you mean?
Yes.
So it's like, but it's like they need to change those tests. 100%, I agree with that. Like the protocols need to change for an average patient, not even for a special patient. They shouldn't look at your age, your race, your color, none of it. You know, they should just, that's a standardized, everybody can do this test and then we'll find out what's going on with them, you know?
Right,
Like
especially non-invasive blood work that can catch things early that might be going on. That would be amazing.